Good morning, Minecrafters, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 8, Coming Out of Hiding from Shame. So last week, I guess it was a week and a half at this point, we were talking about shame, toxic shame, and the ways that it hides. And this week, we're going to talk about, what happens once we get it, once we really get it, what toxic shame is and what it's done to us. We're going to talk about how to come out with it, how to come out of hiding, right out into the open so we can be who we are, who we were meant to be, our very best selves. So it's important also to revisit, sort of what happens, because when we're a small child, you're just born, we're an infant, we're one, we're two, we're toddlers, and then 3, 4, and 5, preschool age and kindergarten age. We are banking on the mirroring of other people, those caregivers in our lives. Watching them watch us and respond to us is how we figure out who we are. So that's great when it's, Granny saying, "Oh, honey, thank you for helping Grandma, and look what a great helper you are, and oh, aren't you such a good big brother?" That stuff is just food for the soul when we're little. And so we kind of, using the work of John Bradshaw, who is amazing. He also has YouTube talks out. He's Sense Deceased. His life has done he has offered so much to this world on as far as toxic shame and how to heal it. Personally, I find him amazing. He's got to start back in the 80s, at least from what I remember, with the whole adult children of alcoholics movement. And he's big on the inner child, and I love that because all of us, I'm thinking of myself at 55, that inner child, I'm very aware of my inner child. So that inner 5-year-old or however old you may have been when, some things happen to you, the inner child is still underneath there, regardless of whether you're, 28, 38, 48, 58, 68, whatever. She or he or they're still underneath there. When we trust someone else and experience their love and acceptance, we begin to change our beliefs about ourselves. We learn that we were not bad. We learn that we are lovable and acceptable. We learn that we are not bad. We learn that we are not bad people. We are not rotten to the core. We learn that we are lovable and acceptable. That can be even hard to say when somebody's first coming into the healing process with shame. We won't make eye contact. We'll look at the ground. How could I possibly be lovable? I can't tell you enough. Back when I was therapizing, let's say, older adults, and they could be young adults, 25, 35, 45, and they can't even look you in the eye when you say something truly positive and genuine. Wow, what great progress you're making. I can tell that, how intelligent you are with this or how, and I can see that with my students. Sometimes I'll keep them after because they're doing really well with something and or they're struggling with something. And I'll say, well, okay, I can tell you are a really intelligent young man. So that's not it. Let's try to figure out why it is that you're unable to get these assignments in because you've got the tools. And they'll look around, look at the ground, and I cannot tell you how many times my wonderful listeners out there where I've had students eventually, in that conversation, bring their eye contact back to me and say, "What did you say?" And I said, "You're obviously a really intelligent young man. So therefore, there's something else going on here." And they'll look at me and say, "No one has ever said that to me in my life. Are you sure? Do you think?" I mean, and that's at a young adult stage, and it can be so hard. And that's all shame. Shying away from the good stuff is because of the roadblock of shame. And personally, I've been blessed with so many good people in my life. And I think a lot of us who grow up in, really dysfunctional, toxic environments, we often go looking for it. And I can't tell you. And then I've also just had angels in my life. And I mentioned one of my TED Talks of any of you have watched either of those. Very fortunate to grow up with a best friend who is still very much in my life. We talk every other week, literally, about, kind of where we are on our authentic and healing journey. So even as little kids, and she had stuff going on in her life that was pretty heavy too. And we used to sit up on the roof. We lived right behind each other in a New York neighborhood, and basically like little 2 and 3 bedroom ranch houses. So we're very, very close together. And we used to sit up on the roof talking about our stuff. We were 6 and 7 years old, and to have that my entire growing up with all this abuse and craziness and chaos and addiction and all this stuff going on in my life, and also the very heavy stuff she had going on in her life, super validating. Because even at those ages, kids are just honest, right? You're talking about everything. Thank God, at ages 7, 8, 9, we both felt a whole lot less alone, because we realized that somebody else had stuff too. And even if you didn't have that person at 6, 7, or 8, you can find that person now. Find that safe person now who you can be vulnerable with. And then I just don't want to be too repetitive. This is my TED talk too. I thankfully landed myself at St. Mike's College in Burlington, Vermont, or actually Colchester. And St. Mike saved my life. The good people there are just wrapped around with good people. I remember getting there for orientation. As I was looking around at these, kids, basically, right? We're all 18, and they were so carefree and seemingly happy. And obviously, some must have had something going on, but for the most part, they were just happy and carefree. And it was like hitting a brick wall from coming straight out of my house, which was at its peak craziness when I was in high school, and coming out of that, like I was like walking on quicksand as a teenager, struggling for any kind of stability. Um, and to see these kids and their parents caring about them and just having all this stability, it was like a culture shock for me, almost in a wonderful way. But it was like hitting a brick wall. This is just, I wasn't used to such normalcy. What was normal for me was daily chaos and trying to survive. And I can't tell you how sobering it was, to first set foot on St. Mike's campus, and to kind of become aware of a whole different world where it was just so much easier, people caring about each other. And then so when this mirroring is not healthy, and it's shameful messages constantly, like, there you go again. I knew you'd never amount to anything, or of course, or your sister's the smart one in the family. I expected you to get these D's, or whatever kind of, toxic mirroring. That's going to affect us in a big way. And we're not saying parents have to be perfect. I want to do a disclaimer there, because nobody is, obviously. We're talking about the good enough parent. The good enough parent doesn't mean they don't slip and have a crabby moment. However, these continual, shaming messages take a gigantic, let me say gigantic, toll on child development. So, John starts out by reminding us that the excruciating loneliness fostered by toxic shame is dehumanizing. As a person isolates more and more, he loses the benefit of human feedback. He loses the mirroring eyes of others. And then he gets into Eric Erickson. I'm not sure those of you out there have know about Eric Erickson. He is or was a developmental psychologist from way back, and he had 8 stages of development, which, even though maybe a smidge outdated, are actually still going pretty strong. And Eric Erickson was big on identity formation. So John explains Eric Erickson has demonstrated clearly that identity formation is always a social process. We're talking about that mirroring again. He defines identity as an inner sense of sameness and continuity, which is matched by the mirroring eyes of at least one significant other. This can be dad or mom, or dad and dad, grandma. We're talking about who mostly took care of you. It was the contaminated mirroring by our significant relationships that has fostered our own toxic shame. So, in order to begin our healing process, we have to first, of course, realize what shame is, what it does to us, and then to own it and just come out right in the open, right out of hiding with it, so we can get on track with kind of undoing a lot of these messages and releasing this toxicity that gets in the way. It so gets in the way. So we're talking about the inner child here, right? That little 3-year-old or 4-year-old living inside you, or 5 or 7-year-old living inside you, 10 or 12-year-old living inside you. And John talks about, he says, shame becomes toxic because of premature exposure. Shame to me still at 55 years old is like sitting out on that tree branch naked for everybody to see. It's that feeling, when it's not safe. Obviously, when it's safe, then we have some very healthy vulnerability going on, which can actually strengthen and does strengthen our relationships. Shame is this being exposed when we're not ready, or better yet, without our permission. So John says shame becomes toxic because of premature exposure. We are exposed either unexpectedly or before we are ready to be exposed. We feel helpless and powerless. No wonder that we fear the scrutinizing eyes of others. However, the only way out of toxic shame is to embrace the shame, and that we must come out of hiding. And, because John was in recovery himself from alcoholism, he makes lots of references to AA and the 12-step programs. And as mentioned before, I grew up with two alcoholic parents, abusive alcoholic parents, and one in recovery, one not so much. And I had the privilege of being kind of exposed to AA right around, I think, the age of 12. And my memories are just so fond of going to the anniversaries, and not just because of the high test sheet cake. This my younger sister and I weren't allowed to have sugar much, almost not at all. And I would look forward to those anniversaries for that corner piece. She and I used to argue over that corner piece, just a little sidetrack there. And even at 55, and being 12 in that circumstance, I remember I just, on some level, got how real and genuine the people in AA were. I absolutely loved going to the meetings and listening to their stories. They're deep and rich and full of life and so authentic. And that is my memory. Even I've got it. I don't have the details of all their stories, but I really got um, how engaged I was in listening to these people. I don't know if you've ever read the children's book, The Velveteen Rabbit. That's one of my favorites. If you haven't, you should. As a grown up, read it as a grown up. And the Velveteen Rabbit that goes through, life. He goes through life, and slowly his fur kind of gets rubbed off, and he becomes just real, warm and snuggly, and real, and not necessarily as shiny and attractive. He's just worn down by life, and I was like I was surrounded by velveteen rabbits who really had a grip on why we're supposed to be here. They really had a grip on their authenticity. Right out of the gate, John talks about finding a social network because, and we know this to be true, in general, outside of the conversation we're having. I bring up Marty Seligman a lot, the father of positive psychology, and with his PERMA, that acronym, the number one, we know this to be true across the boards, the number one from a well-being standpoint for longevity and the highest quality of existence is positive relationships. We know that to be true. And John Bradshaw is saying we've got to find a social network, and that's regardless of where you land on the introvert extrovert spectrum. Some of us need more people in our lives, and some of us have a lower level of social stimulation, and that's okay, as long as you've got your safe people. And what Marty Seligman means by the quality of relationships, what we are looking at, especially in romantic ones, but across the boards, is not about quantity, it's about quality. We want to know, when it comes right down to it, that I can count on you. And it means even if you have a little spiff and you're not talking for a few weeks, and you call that person in the middle of the night with a crisis, your heart's breaking, been cracked down the middle, or something happened to you or whatever, that they would drop everything, even if there was something petty going on. They would drop all of it to listen to you in that moment. That's the level of relationship we are talking about. This can also be a non-shaming, intimate partner, right? The idea is safe person, safe best friend, somebody who you feel you can be openly vulnerable with because, and of course, what also makes sense, as we've said, what set us up for this early on as children were our social relationships, our personal relationships, mom and dad, or mom and mom, or that uncle or whoever, with this toxic mirroring that we learned and brought into our hard drive, brought right into our hard drive and became part of our programming. We internalized these messages and made them part of us. And that's how we became shame-based. That's how our filter was set up, looking at the world through shame-based eyes and taking that in. So it makes great sense that in order to heal, we need new personal relationships that are healthy and loving in order to heal our shame. It's not too late for that mirroring. Different, yes, and absolutely not too late. And on a very, very positive note, okay, things, people say, oh, they're sponges, little kids are sponges. That's all true. Things happen fast, and maybe heal more quickly physiologically and everything else. Yes, and the bonus on the other side of being in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or even older is that we, as adults with complete cognitive maturation, we can also make a lot of choices that we obviously couldn't have done at 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, 15. So we can kind of monitor our healing in a way that a child couldn't. It is absolutely not too late. I'm living proof of that. Because as John said, shame masks our deepest secrets about ourselves and embodies our belief that we are essentially defective. We feel so awful, we dare not look at it ourselves, much less tell anyone else. The only way we can find out we were wrong about ourselves is to risk exposing ourselves to someone else's scrutiny. And, we're obviously talking about, or maybe not so obviously if you had, a childhood similar to mine, where you may have been used to conditional love, which is like an oxymoron. It's not like an oxymoron. It is an oxymoron. Like student teacher, lost and found. It's opposites, right? The real thing, the real deal with love, the real thing is unconditional. Whether it's a partner, a parent, a best friend, it's unconditional. It's not "I love you" if, if you do what I say, if you do this, if you manipulate. True love, loves you with all your broken parts. So in order to learn to kind of give ourselves a reboot, we need to learn that we're not bad. We need to learn that from the mirroring of healthy, good people. So the real deal promotes healing, right? Whether that's a best friend, or a partner or whatever, we need that person we can absolutely count on. And so John says, the real deal, true love heals and affects spiritual growth. If we do not grow because of someone else's love, it's generally because it's a counterfeit form of love. It's not real. So if we're feeling guarded and, on eggshells and all that, that's just us still locked into the shame, which is looking to reaffirm how we believe about ourselves underneath. That means we are still being roped in by our hard drive and still being driven around by these unconscious messages that we received as children. True love is unconditional positive regard. Again, we're not talking about necessarily romantic. Yes to romantic, and yes, best friends too, or sibling or whatever. Unconditional positive regard allows us to be whole and accept all the parts of ourselves. Right here is the biggest challenge, because when we weren't accepted by our own parents as little children, much of which the time we don't even have a memory of, because before the age of 3 is called infantile amnesia. So unless there's some kind of big trauma there, we think we have a memory. We really don't. We have feeling memories, very strong feeling memories as far as trust or not trusting, love or not, or being unconditionally loved or not being unconditionally loved. Very solid emotional memory. But before the age of 3, we really don't have, not a great time to take your kid to Disney World, as they say. So to undo these early messages that are so deeply embedded in the vault, I like to say the vault, think like a bank with like big, huge locks and all kinds of combinations. All that unconscious stuff is locked in there. And to really be able to allow ourselves to accept all the parts of ourselves, which includes the broken parts, we all have them. This really, really takes courage, for one, stick to itness, and also the love of other people. It just does. We need to have some, maybe later in life, positive, authentic, loving mirroring of who we are. And it isn't too late. It isn't too late. Another something that can be very healing and very cathartic, right? Cathartic comes from the Greek, to release, and a real, real emotional release, not just a little tiny cry, but, kind of a cry from your bone marrow where you just feel, 50 pounds lighter. One thing that really works, and also something I did back when I was therapizing with people, but for me, I wrote a letter to, well, specifically one of my parents. I wrote a letter, and it doesn't mean you're going to send it. In fact, that person may not even be on this earth anymore. The letter is not about the person, it's about you, and just get it all out there. I expected this, and I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt, unprotected, whatever it is you need to say, and just keep that letter. And because it's, again, that process can be so very, very healing and helps to get us to a place of letting it go, which for a lot of people can be a very big challenge. And that forgiveness thing is very, very important. And people often run from it, for reasons we're going to get to now. And probably the first or the biggest thing that keeps people away from forgiving is their respective religions, often, and just what you hear out there, that forgiving means forgetting, which is not true. We'll get to that in a second. And I think the biggest one is that people think if they forgive, that it gives the person a pass for whatever they did, whether it was a big hurt or it was a fully intended violation, on the whole spectrum of what that can mean. And let's say something as severe as a 3 or 5 year old being sexually molested or assaulted in some way, and still the forgiveness thing is so, so important. And I'm going to talk about it in a secular way, in a psychological way. And for those of you who have different religions or beliefs or spiritualities or whatever, you can choose to turn that into whatever you want. And that can be even more meaningful. However, from a psychological point, we're going to talk about how important it is to let all that go. It's well over with. It's the thing is, when we hang on to things, we give up our power. And it can be wonderfully enticing to hang on to anger, especially because our feelings can be so mixed toward a parent, even if they were blatantly abusive and it seems like it makes no sense. Like, how can you still love him? He hit you, he this, he that, and the verbal abuse and whatever, and still that little child underneath, it doesn't make sense because that little child wanted to make it work. That little child had this unwavering loyalty to this dysfunctional parent who wasn't capable of giving them all that they needed. And so here's where we start to work through all this. For me, what I like to say is, and it's been a process, trust me, I wouldn't change a thing. I would not change a thing about my childhood. And there are moments of it that, let me tell you, were just excruciating, absolutely terrifying, and things like that. And I still wouldn't change a thing. And again, I wouldn't want to relive it, because I wouldn't want to change a thing, because everything that happened all along the way is also made me who I am today. The post-traumatic growth that has happened was well worth it. Again, I wouldn't want to go backwards, and I love and like who I am now, and I wouldn't trade this for anything. And many people think that forgiveness means that you have to still be in a relationship with that person or repair it, to whatever degree it needs to be repaired to happen, as long as they're still on this earth, obviously. And nothing could be farther from the truth. So Now, if it's obviously there are shades of, areas of gray here where if it's a relationship that's actually healthy and just had some rough patches, as we say in Vermont, that's different. If it's really, for the most part, a healthy relationship that just had some hurts and for whatever reasons, then certainly, we always give it our last college try. It doesn't mean to just abandon people. However, when they're toxic, this is a whole different story. Forgiveness is about taking our power back. As if that person hasn't taken enough from us. Ages 5 through whatever they did, or if it was as an adult, whatever. Now that we're residing there and living there, and we know about the thoughts come first, feelings come second, right? So they are now, causing us to feel this way, and when it's long since over. So they're still continuing to take from us. Think about that. And we are allowing it. It's very important to take control. No one wants to be a victim, or if they do want to be a victim, fine for you. I'm not going to be a victim. Instead, we want to be a survivor. A victim place is not healthy, regardless of what happened to you. The victim mentality is not healthy. We want to be survivors. We want to be whole and complete. And basically what we're doing when we, find this love in a group, friendships, romance, all of the above, hopefully, that's great. We learn that what we're doing is really sort of reuniting all of these split off, shamed parts of us that we ourselves learned to reject. Shame is all about getting in our rib cage and teaching us that we are so defective that we should reject ourselves. It takes a whole lot to undo that. It can be done. It's done all the time, and it's healing, and it's wonderful when we get there. Wonderful when we get there. And in fact, Virginia Satir speaks of the 5 freedoms that accrue when one is loved unconditionally. We really are loved unconditionally for exactly who we are, who God made us to be, or whoever that is through the universe, the creator of all things made us to be, who does not create junk. Just remember to tell yourselves that. The creator of all things does not create junk. And Virginia says these freedoms involve our basic powers. I like to say superpowers. These are the power to perceive, the power to love, because a lot of people think, especially locked into the codependent behaviors, right? That, we're running around rescuing and taking care of, compulsively and all that stuff. That's really about something other than love. That is not the real thing. The power to love and actually choose and want is one of these freedoms. Authentically love. The power to emote, right? To actually feel, to allow ourselves to feel and without judgment. The power to think and express, and the power to envision or imagine, to bring that kindergartner back, because she is in there, or he is in there, or they are in there. Bring that little 5-year-old back to have that fabulous imagination and to envision a brilliant future for ourselves. Because the truth is, when we are feeling whole and complete and as our best selves, obviously, the world is our oyster. And of course, the opposite is true. I mean, I've explained to my kids for years, and obviously with different dialogue when they're 7 versus 17 or 25, that, when they're little, happy people don't act this way. So it doesn't give somebody a pass to be mean to you. That would be me talking to them in, second grade or something. It doesn't give them a pass. Their behavior is not okay. You have to stand up for yourself and realize that they are very sad underneath, or something underneath, because happy people just don't behave this way. And on, the grown-up level, having conversations with my young adult children who are all in their 20s. One's about to be 29, actually, my oldest, and having conversations with them, and also with my, adult friends in their 50s. And then we look at it, look at something, together with, obviously, again, no pass, but something's going on with this person, that they're lashing out in every direction, that there's shame going on underneath, insecurity going on underneath, because whole, complete people just don't have a desire in the world to hurt anyone. And this reaching out and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable when we were used to being so guarded and kind of in this shortstop stance or in the trenches, waiting for that next bomb to drop or whatever. It can be, emotionally speaking, it can be the bravest thing we take on in our lives to risk that kind of intimacy, whether it's romantic or it's intimacy within the 12-step program, in AA or a codependence anonymous group or whatever. It can take, the most courage we've ever had to muster up. And I can tell you, I'm very blessed with my husband of 30 years. And in the beginning, it was just so hard to trust. We actually started dating in college, and he didn't do anything for me not to trust him. It was just so hard to risk, kind of like, lifting up that, the big gate on a castle or something, and risking, some kind of army running in the castle and taking over or something. It was a huge risk, and he was well worth it, and he's an angel, not perfect, no one is, and he also comes from a very loving family, also not perfect, no one is, and it was very validating to see, first his, kind of reactions and responses to some of the things that were said and some of the behaviors. They were just so foreign, you know, um, compared to how he grew up. John says it so well. He says self acceptance overcomes the self rupture of toxic shame. Self acceptance is the way to gain our personal power. When we accept ourselves, we are unified. All our energy is centered and flows outward. It's also extremely important for us to grieve our childhoods. And of course, this is best done. I'll make sure a disclaimer, because once again, the podcasts are meant to maybe be a complement to therapy, or somebody's on the lighter side. They're absolutely not meant to take the place of professional treatment, and can work very well with treatment. So anyway, it's very important to do this inner child work and to grieve our childhoods. And that's one of the big keys to becoming unstuck, is to allow ourselves to make sense of this pain and to grieve that lost time of being carefree, because we're not going to get it back in that way. Not in that way. We can get it back in other ways, but we need to really kind of wrap around that 5-year-old self or 7-year-old self, 15-year-old self, wrap around her, him, and really empathize with yourself and love that little kid, and tell her or him or them that they're going to be okay. And I will tell you, my very favorite definition of forgiveness, which I live by. I actually heard from Claudia Black. She is a pioneer of the adult children of alcoholics movement. And this was way back in the 80s. I was at St. Mike's, just barely on the path, barely had my, first light bulb moment with, I got there at St. Mike's as a freshman. I said it saved my life. I started to go to all these things and be surrounded by loving, kind, amazing people. And it opened every door for me. So I remember she came to speak at St. Mike's, and her whole thing was based on her book of It Will Never Happen to Me, for adult children of alcoholics. And the forgiveness thing, I'll never forget this. Claudia Black said that, so many people get wrapped up in got to repair the relationship, got to have an apology, none of which are true, right? And she said forgiveness absolutely does not have to do with forgetting. Not at all. In fact, it has everything to do with remembering and choosing to move forward. Because only then can we start the grieving process, because the fact is that's how our childhood was. Can't change it. It's over. That's it. So that acceptance is just so important for healing. And then, people say it's never too late to have a happy childhood. That's true in a different sense. It's just going to look different. So a lot of the things we missed out on, we can certainly do as adults. And at the same time, that childhood was what it was, and we are who we are, and that acceptance piece is just absolutely key. Just so healthy. Only then, really, can we move into this, place of forgiveness and letting go. I feel like I want to sing the theme song from Frozen because that's what it's all about. And sometimes with forgiveness, people also think that, they're just going to wait. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Well, that can be true if, God forbid, somebody was assaulted, yesterday, because that might take some time, but stuff from a childhood, if that's the attitude, I'm going to wait, I'm not ready. Well, you're going to be 5, 10, 20 years older and still not there yet, because it takes conscious choice that, the heavens aren't just going to part and then you're kind of struck with the, forgiveness bolt. That's just not how it works. It's a conscious choice, or as they also say in the 12-step program, when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, sick of listening to yourself and allowing these toxic messages to just, be in that hamster wheel flying around in your brain, and to take your power back, it really takes getting sick of it, getting sick of living in that head of yours with all that going around and that person continuing to take. They may be dead and they're still taking from you. Think about that, the logic of that. And so when we make this decision to forgive, meaning only that we are consciously choosing to remember what happened and move forward. That's what we're talking about. The forgetting part is ridiculous. The brain does not work like a DVD player. In fact, anything that involves trauma, usually the memory becomes even more intrusive and repetitive. So that's not going to work. So remembering and consciously choosing to move forward is a huge, big step or a leap in the right direction, because the authentic self is now on her or his way back into the driver's seat. And, please don't misunderstand. We are the ones who need to take ownership of, our own mental health, our own physical health. Our happiness is our own responsibility and no one else's. What we're saying here is that human beings are wired for social connection, regardless of, again, where you land on the introvert extrovert spectrum. We still need emotional connection and we need safe people in our lives. So it's not, in any way discounting our own accountability for our own happiness. It is absolutely our responsibility. It's just simply stating that we need the social connection. We need that person or people that we know, no matter what, we can truly, truly count on. Okay, so this is really how it works, right? We've talked about the awareness piece. We can't do what we don't know. So obviously, the awareness piece is first. And then, the courage to really dive in and dig deep, because only then can we really seek out the validation we need. We need the validation and safe, good people in our lives. And, it's interesting because we often hear, we really can't fully love anyone until we learn how to love ourselves. And though there is certainly enormous amounts of truth in that, there's also a chicken egg dynamic there as well, in my opinion, because someone who was kind of, raised in a shame-based environment, and internalized all these messages, who didn't, have the mirroring and learn to love themselves early on. It is a little bit of a chicken egg situation, because we need the mirroring of other people, like on the outside of us, to mirror what's on the inside of us, to kind of, help us into getting into that better, healthier place where we're kind of able to love ourselves. So there is sort of that, I think, that additional component there as well. Okay, what I'm going to do now is a little brief recap. That last 10 minutes or so, for some reason, some of the individual little clips got scrambled. So if it sounds like they're a little out of sync, it's because they are. And the only way to fix that is to do the entire thing over, which I don't want to do, because I think it was actually a really good conversation. So hopefully you're able to follow that last, I'm not sure what happened with things, but hopefully able to follow that. So we'll just recap here. So awareness, we can't do what we don't know. Courage, the only way out is through, as they say, right? So the only way, out of shame is through it. And that involves, ripping the blanket off, per se, right? And just seeing it. Right out in the spotlight, embracing our shame, then seeking out validation and connections with safe people, unconditional love, not I love you if, loving all of your broken parts. Um, and then working towards that acceptance piece, um, sort of after we grieve, the losses that happen along the way, the loss of childhood, loss of part of a childhood, loss of being carefree. There's a lot of loss when a child grows up in a dysfunctional household and not getting the enough love, or never mind all the abuse stuff. So we got to grieve that, because it is what it is, was what it was, and to grieve that and land at this place of acceptance. I don't want to relive it, but I'm grateful for who I am. I love and like who I am. And then we can really truly let go in the secular sense, or again, make it fit with your religion or spirituality. And we're not looking for apology. We don't care. We may not repair the relationship again. Anyone, let's say on the extreme end, who was, sexually violated at, 5 years old, most people would agree that it's not the best idea to have that relationship, I would say. And then it's okay. We don't have to, all this obligatory stuff. We don't have to be in a relationship with toxic people. We can release them like helium balloons. I'm a big fan. We're talking about truly toxic people, not just people that need a little extra effort. Truly toxic people. We can let go of them like helium balloons. It's kind of like, making the cut for a sports team, right? They have to make, team Kimberly, let's say, and then there might be a bench, there might be no bench, and then there might be those that landed on the just plain got cut list that they used to, tack to the gym door for those that didn't make it. The people in your life need to be worthy of you. They need to earn it. That honor their mother and father thing. For me, and it took me a while to get here, but for me, honor is earned. It is absolutely earned. And that's it, the end. Just remember, forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about remembering and choosing to move forward. It's about taking our power back. The authentic self is back in power, and forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off from Northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.